Hello, everyone. This is another edition of Gender and Society Clusters Roundtable for the month of April from Center of New Economic Studies. And today we will be discussing the Don't Say Gay bill with the panelists Apurva, Suniti, Anushka, Anvita, and Meghna, and I will be moderating this roundtable. So to introduce the topic for today, as we all know, a couple of weeks ago, Oklahoma became the second state from America to pass the Don't Say Gay bill, as the name has sort of stuck with the bill, regardless of its actual official name. And Florida recently decided to expand its original Don't Say Gay bill, applying more restrictions to public schools and public colleges. The bill has brought attention to the discourse about including teachings on sexual orientation and gender identity in the lower grades of school education specifically. While the bill has to do with homophobic connotations, many suggestions made by feminists and the queer community to improve the Indian education system primarily focuses on gender neutrality as the first step towards a more progressive and inclusive curriculum. To discuss and sort of start the conversation related to this very controversial bill. Let's first discuss what this bill entails for these two states and the American landscape itself, as it seems to keep on spreading. It um, uh, seems to be adopted by other states in the future as well. So what do you think were the intentions? What all is part of this particular bill? Yes, Sunidhi.
Okay, so about on reading about this particular bill, the how you said it's like it holds homophobic connotations, and like what the bill, the name of the bill itself suggests. Um, Basically, um, this bill is passed by the Senate to sort of make sure that no kind of education related to sexual orientations or any kind of gender identities is basically introduced to kids under the age of 10 in schools and in in any of the institutions which impart any kind of education, and it's basically concerned to be like a right for parents, and that parents, if they get to know that their children are being exposed to such kind of content in the schools or in any other educational institutions, they have the right to sort of take action against that particular institution to make sure that such things are not taught, such topics are not taught. And the problematic part of this bill particularly has been the how the bill has been framed, as in the vague terminology of how it says sexualizing acts, and not typically telling if it's like the sexual objectification like pornography or stripping or something like that, or is it about the gender identity or the orientation of a person.
Thanks, Sunidhi. Meghna?
Yeah, so like building on what Suniti said, as she considering the impact of the bill, as she pointed out, the whole rationale behind the bill was that it should be the parents and their discretion when and how to introduce these topics to their children. However, this is again just confining the sexual identity within the four walls of our houses, like it is something very personal. But as we all know that your sexual identity and gender are not private, it's all political, and unless we are not educated about it in the public sphere, its expression publicly also becomes a taboo. The whole idea here should be to bridge this private and public divide and like address these topics from the very start. However, the bill seems to be problematizing the entire narrative. The whole idea of education around sexual orientation and gender identity is being treated as a problem that needs to be addressed or curtailed, which is again taking us in the direction that this is not normative, further exacerbating the social stereotypes and prejudice. I got the chance to do a bit of research, and studies actually show that the LGBTQ youth, especially in Oklahoma and Florida, face a higher health and suicide risk as compared to their cisgender or straight peers. So when these kids are given the spaces that affirm their gender identity, I think it'll instill confidence in them and kind of boost a sense of social acceptance. However, the bill here is limiting important discussions about sexuality that could harm LGBTQ students by preventing them from receiving accurate information about their sexual health as well as their well being.
Thanks, Apurva, and then Anushka.
Am I audible? Okay. So the bill is leading to like extremely restrictive and even non-existing education on important subjects like gender and sexual orientation. Also, this is not only creating a hostile environment for students, but also teachers and families who are part of the LGBTQ community. But also, it's like creating an idea that someone who is not part of the community, like sorry, someone who's part of the community is doing something wrong, and it's also promoting very exclusivity and also bigotry. In a survey that was done in this state, it was found that around 56% of the LGBTQ parents considered moving to a different state to avoid the discrimination that they were facing from the neighbors and the harassment their children was facing from other children in the school, just because they had parents who were part of the LGBTQ community. And also, the bill says that in Florida, the children were the children like sorry, Florida have all the principal in Florida schools have to expose the identity of the students in like within 6 weeks after they come out to the school, which is like extremely dangerous. And it also creates situation where they might be kicked out of their home just because they identify under the LGBTQ community. That's it.
Yeah, I would just like to add on what Apurva talked about. So the entire fact about the entire thing about the fact that people cannot express the gender and the gender identity, that the gender that they identify with, and the fact that they cannot talk about what sort of families they're coming from if they're not coming from the heteronormative family that America or these bills sort of seem to cherish. It's completely taking away from the freedom of expression of individuals, an idea on which America is literally built on. And the fact that principals and teachers, they are threatened with expulsion if they do not expose the identity of the children who are coming out to these to them. That is just something that's completely unbelievable, because not only are you threatening and not only are you threatening the youth of the country, you're also threatening the people who are trying to give them a safe space. So essentially, what this bill and the subsequent legislations that I'm sure are going to come after this is that they're treating homosexuality, and they're treating any sort of identity that does not align with the heteronormative identity that these bills are talking about. They are being considered to be taboo, and they are being and people and they are being tabooed they and the people who identify with such identities are going to be discriminated against.
Thanks, everyone. You all kind of beautifully connected your ideas together on this bill and its impact on the two states so far. As Apurva and Meghna sort of already covered, how the LGBTQ community from these two states have reacted to the bill by having no choice but to leave or leave these states or just sort of resort to not being publicly queer, which makes this bill in particular extremely dangerous. Sort of puts us back so many years in all the progress that the queer community has made so far, especially in the Americas. To sort of like follow this up with a question related to education and how sexual orientation is sort of central to queer ideas and queer studies specifically. Why do you think? I think Meghna or Apurva as well sort of commented on this. But why should children be taught the ideas surrounding sexual orientation and the complexities of gender identities? If anyone disagrees in any way or thinks there should be limitations to this, what are the grounds for your disagreements? So Meghna and then Sunidhi and then the others.
Yeah, so I feel teaching children about sexual orientation and gender identity is really important. It's not only, it actually promotes kind of understanding and acceptance of diversity. So children who learn about different sexual orientations and gender identities are more likely to be accepting of people who are quote unquote different from themselves. Like teaching about sexual orientation and gender identity can also help to reduce bullying and discrimination to a great extent. Like when we understand that people can have different sexual orientation and gender identities, we are less likely to be hostile towards people who we, sort of consider different from ourselves. And most importantly, help children to understand their own identity and feelings. I'm pretty much sure that, like, growing up, all of us kind of felt confused or unsure about our own gender identity and sexual orientation. And I think education around these topics can help them feel more comfortable with themselves and their own feelings. And again, I think it all obviously helps in promoting equality and human rights. Like everyone that deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. And I think education here is an instrument which will kind of help this, further.
Apurva or Sunidhi, whoever wants to go first.
I can go first. So yeah, I was wanted to say that I feel there is a prime need for children to be taught about the various sexual and gender identities that are present in the world. Children who are not exposed to these identities are usually the one who have like a very hard time accepting these communities, especially in the later part of their lives. And also there's like extremely there's an extreme lack of awareness about homosexual people and all the other people that falls under that umbrella term. Like personally, whatever I have learned about the LGBTQ community or homosexuals was mainly through the internet, and to be honest, that's a very unreliable source of information. So that's why there's like a huge need to be taught on these subjects so that we get the correct information about them, and also we don't form this prejudice and form bigotry in our minds. And also bills like these form an assumption in the minds of these children that being part of that community is something that is wrong. Like, if you are not allowing children from a young age to be taught on these subjects, when they grow up later in their life, they feel that something that this is wrong. You should not identify as someone who's a homosexual. You cannot be friends with someone who's a homosexual because you've never been grown up as someone who have accepted these kind of identities.
Sunidhi, then Anvita, and then Anushka.
So I think adding on to what Apurva said about, people, children who've not been grown up with these ideas do not have like the sort of acceptance to these ideas. In my personal thought also as a person, since, there wasn't a lot of awareness as we grew up. So it took us a little while to actually get familiarized with the ideas and uh, understand the difference between terms. And honestly, even where in the places where these bills are passed, when there are like there are same sex parents who are trying to make a family and everything, it is a concern for them. It would be difficult for them because then it's not just like the children. Of course, the children will find it difficult to talk to their parents about it. And if like because there's a difference between a public school and a private school, so the children in the private school would be learning about this, while the public school they would be under the under this particular provision they would come under. So there will be a sort of difference in the thought process of both the kids and the people. The children who've been studying from the school would actually have an issue sharing about their thoughts, and if they at some point feel that they are there is a sort of difference in them, they are a little different from the others, it will be difficult for them to accept that it is not a wrong thing and the way they are feeling is correct, and they have to voice their opinions. And similarly, if there are like same sex parents who are trying to adopt and upbring a child, it'll be difficult for them and their kid as well to settle in a school. It'll be difficult for them to stay in that particular state which has that particular rule, because they will always have the uh, will always have a critical eye from the perspective of law and from the perspective of people.
Yes, Anvita, you can go on now, and then Anushka.
Oh, yeah, right. So I wanted to problematize the issue of how they explicitly mention the term age appropriate or developmentally appropriate education to the kids. So I'd like to quote Nivedita Menon from Seeing Like a Feminist, where she brings up an argument about how certain feminists believe that it is the child rearing practices which try to establish and perpetuate certain differences between sexes. That is, from childhood, boys and girls are trained in appropriate gender specific forms of behavior. So, if Florida or Oklahoma is trying to educate their children about the only in an age appropriate or developmentally appropriate way, I don't think they're trying to achieve or they can achieve what they're trying to do, because firstly, obviously it's going to be exclusive. It's not going to include the community that live in the society, and it constantly tries to exclude them from the lifestyle that they would want to create for the children there. So that is one thing that I wanted to bring up.
Anushka, yes, go on.
Yes. I would just like to touch upon what everyone said. As we are kids, society, the understanding of what a society is, or what marriage is, or what sexual identity or gender identity is, it's not something that we are inherently born with. It is something that we learn over time. And considering the fact that Florida and Oklahoma are saying that having different gender or sexual identity than the one that is heteronormative or heterosexual, which is essentially the main discourse of our society, the American society. What they are doing is that they are creating a normal and an abnormal. So, and that is extremely dangerous, because when you're saying that you can't talk about gay families, you can't talk about homosexual love, or you can't talk about a gender identity that doesn't fit in within the binary of male and female, what you're doing is you're creating a normal, the which is a man and a woman marrying, which is identifying as a male or a woman, and then you're creating a divergent, which is having anything that does not fit in what is already there. And I think it's really important for children to learn about different sexual identities and different gender identities, and question what they have been taught from a young age about what is right or wrong, uh, to and to question what they've been taught since a young age, because as I think Apurva or Sunidhi said, we our generation was introduced to these ideas extremely late. But overall, if we get familiar with these ideas, we are more accepting towards it. So if we teach children from a young age that there are alternative ways of being and expressing yourself and identifying yourself than what has been taught to you, what society tells you to do, it's something that we can create a generation of people who, when they grow up, can bring a fundamental change in the way governments function, in the way society is structured, and it can be a more inclusive society than the one that we are living in right now.
Right. I think it's really important what the points made by Sunidhi and Anushka about queer families and how they won't be able to sort of express themselves, especially with children from these families who are getting educated in such schools. And I think it's really important the point made by Anvita about age appropriateness, which is quite frequently noticed in debates surrounding Disney and its productions, how people say it's not appropriate to show romantic or sexual relationships in media consumed by children, while what they actually mean to say is sexual relationships between marginal sexual identities, because we do see characters, adult characters, engaging in quite public displays of affection, and quite overtly engaging in romantic relationships, and a romantic narrative. So this sort of brings us to this final question for the discussion. What we think this idea of the Don't Say Gay bill means for India and the Indian landscape, and what is the status of topics such as gender and sexuality in Indian education, and what do you think? Let's come up with ideas about what we think can and should be done to improve the Indian education system in terms of including conversations around surrounding sexual orientation and gender identities. Meghna?
Yeah, so in country like India, where we claim to be progressive, diverse, and inclusive, I feel gender topics such as gender and sexuality is still a matter of great concern. The education system in India, I feel, is still sort of grappling with addressing the complex issues and nuances related to gender and sexuality. And it's sort of funny how we see on social media these days the terminology brown parent has kind of, become synonymous with the orthodox upbringing. And as you all pointed earlier about age appropriate content, age appropriate content. So how brown parents are very controlling and they don't let their children see this stuff, and that also kind of stems from that. So despite some progress, gender and sexuality continue to be taboo topics in Indian society and are sort of often brushed under the carpet. The actually the only policy I can think of recently is the National Education Policy, which was introduced in 2020, which kind of actually goes ahead to highlight the importance of gender sensitive and inclusive education. The policy emphasizes the need for curricular and pedagogical reforms that promote gender equality and sensitivity towards gender and especially the sexual minorities. And it also emphasizes the need for comprehensive sexuality education. But again, this is just one such policy. Despite the policy's progressive stance, there are several challenges in implementing it on the ground. Like, especially from where I come, I feel many schools still lack, trained teachers, resources, as well as materials to impart gender and sexuality education, like especially the conservative attitudes of parents, teachers, and community members often sort of hinder efforts to promote gender and sexuality education. I think one way to like improve the situation is that there is a need to sort of sensitize teachers and parents about the importance of gender and sexuality. And we can introduce some teacher training programs that can be designed to equip them with the necessary knowledge and skills to handle gender and sexuality issues in the classroom setting. And moreover, I think community participation is also very crucial in promoting gender and sexuality education. Like schools should involve parents more and the community members, as well as local NGOs in sort of planning and implementation of these educational programs. This will not only help to create a supportive environment for such initiatives, but will also foster greater acceptance and understanding of gender and sexuality issues.
Anushka and then Anvita.
Yeah, so I think India has a long way to go when it comes to efforts regarding gender and sexuality education, because as far as I remember, all throughout my school life, that was something that we weren't exposed to at all. And I think even with stuff like even while talking about biological stuff which men go through or women go through, we did it in separate class. So our teacher took two separate classes where once she just taught the guys and once where she just taught the girls. So I think this sort of behavior towards gender and sexuality is, it's very regressive and increasingly modern, progressive, and globalized world. This is something that India cannot afford, and this is something that Indian students can't afford because we have a greater access to the internet. We are coming across all of these ideas, and as Apurva said, the internet is not a very good place to learn about all of this. And our schools, our education system is one where we can rely on to give, for somebody to give us more, to give us a safe and a very to give us a safe and like a progressive view of what gender identity and sexual identity is. And we can't hide away from we can't hide away from this. We cannot go on and not discuss these issues, because increasingly, as our politics is being becoming more identity driven, we cannot afford to exclude these identities, because at the end of the day, the personal is the political. So what is happening in a queer person's life, or a non-binary person's life, it is something that will affect them, and this is something that we should all start learning about at a young age.
Yes, Anvita now.
Yes, I'm going to quickly go over what I intend to say. So firstly, I do not think gender and sexuality is an isolated term. So it is constantly influenced by a lot more factors, like the social forces such as the ideology, fear, and political agitation, legal reform, and medical practice as well. And I also think in a country like India, caste, religion, all that plays a very important role in sexuality, uh, as well as gender. I'd like to bring up Dhruba Jyoti's piece of a letter to my lovers, where they write, I know I couldn't be gay and lower caste together. So just one single sentence talks a lot about how in India, being queer itself is not a problem, because there exists hierarchy and oppression. So I think there are a lot more contents that we need to understand in order to understand the um, concept of gender and sexuality in India, and we should not isolate it from all the other social forces that has been prevalent in India. So I think for that we need to start teaching the kids from middle school at least. So
Thanks for your responses. I'll come to the conclusion of the roundtable. As you guys discussed, and Meghna sort of suggested in the start of this question's discussion. Although we are in the very infant stage of bringing these ideas together to especially institutes like our primary education. We'll have to start with the teachers and the parents, and things like teacher training programs and other sensitization workshops can be really helpful. And primary education are sort of part of the formative years of any child's basically critical sort of outlook on society and life. So it becomes really central to how they perceive and react to societal institutions and interactions. So this was a fruitful discussion that we all had. I hope the listeners enjoyed the discussion. We hope to see you soon in the next edition of our cluster roundtable.